And finally, tonight we have our MCHA Senior Curator, Joe Zemla. Joe is a phenomenal researcher and historian, and I know this because I work 10 feet away from him, but also because he gets so many requests from other respected historians to help them with their work. So if the information is out there, the history community knows Joe will find it. He sits on the board of the New Jersey Association of Museums and is part of the team who created the two-time award-winning exhibit on slavery in New Jersey at Marlpit Hall in Middletown. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, definitely take a drive out there. It's really well done, and it's just fascinating. They did a phenomenal job. So without further ado, please welcome Joe Zemla.
Thanks, Dana. I'm going to go back to share. Yeah, so this one is tonight's a little bit different than I guess we're used to doing. It's usually more of a lecture program about a certain topic or new information. This is really just more of a preview of the upcoming exhibition at the Monmouth County Historical Association, which of course is called Storm of Revolution, Monmouth at War. So if anyone has been to our previous exhibition, which was on the edge of war, this is the second one upcoming in a series of three revolutionary era exhibitions, of course, timed to commemorate the 250th. So just this is sort of the broad general introduction panel that you'll see at the exhibit. Just one quick little sidebar, because I know some people have mentioned when they see this musket that it's in fact a percussion cap musket instead of a flintlock musket, which of course would have been used during the Revolution. That is entirely true. However, this is a 1769 British land musket known as the Brown Bess, and it was used at the Battle of Monmouth by Captain Kenneth Hankinson, who was in the 1st Regiment of the Monmouth Militia. However, it was later converted, like many of these early muskets were, into a percussion cap. So a flintlock like was used during the Revolution was a little more time consuming. It was a sort of a hammer with a piece of flint, and it would strike a steel plate, and then when the trigger is pulled, and that would create the sparks that would shoot into the barrel and light up the gunpowder and kind of propel the musket ball out. What this was converted to is what's called a percussion cap, which contained a small amount of chemical charge. So it eliminated the need for the flint, and it was struck by the hammer, and the sparks would then ignite the charge. So anyway, that's just a little sidebar there. You can see on the left, that's a flintlock mechanism like they would have used in the Revolution. And then on the right, what was later converted to what they call a percussion cap. And just because I think it's kind of interesting, I'm going to play probably a 15-second little demo video of what it looks like firing a flintlock musket. So when you see a lot of the old, movies about the Rev War or whatever, a lot of times you see all that smoke coming out. So that's very accurate. You would basically be causing a little explosion in the barrel of this musket that would propel the musket ball. And it was not a very accurate way of firing, but it was what they had at the time. And actually, in fact, much better than it was prior to that. So anyway, so like I said, the previous exhibition was called Monmouth on the Edge of War. That covered the period roughly up until around 1775. So when the colonies were really growing tired of Great Britain extracting all these taxes and revenues from them, with laws, of course, like the Stamp Act and the Townshend Act, which taxed things like glass and paint and tea and pretty much everything that they could imagine. So they were at this point quite fed up and kind of had reached the boiling point, as they say. This document actually goes back. This is a document from the previous exhibit to 1769. And this is when towns like Shrewsbury were being urged to form committees. Most colonists at this point still thought that things would eventually, resolve peacefully. which of course would not be the case, but they were kind of in the early stages of kind of gathering together and forming these committees. So this was one to the inhabitants of the town of Shrewsbury, and this was a meeting at the tavern of Josiah Halstead, which of course now today we know as the Allen House in Shrewsbury, to endeavor at the opposing corruption and oppression and secure our liberty and property. And this one was recently conserved. You can see it has some of that little backing paper where it looks like maybe a mouse or rodent got to it at some point through time, but we just recently had a bunch of these documents conserved. So a few more just from the previous again. These are a few pamphlets, kind of propaganda type pamphlets. So following the Boston Tea Party in 1773, the British Parliament passed a series of what the colonists would refer to as the Intolerable Acts. And these really served more as retaliation more than anything. They were just for things like the Boston Tea Party. These laws, in essence, closed the Boston Harbor, which of course was a major concern for Massachusetts and also other colonies because it kind of made trade come to a standstill. It caused food shortages. And actually, more than anything, what the Intolerable Acts did was kind of unite the colonies. So, in essence, kind of backfired against Great Britain. They were really trying to retaliate, in the end, kind of made for a stronger revolution. Like I said, three early pamphlets. I just wanted to quickly point out the one on the far left. I always like this one. This is printed by an early underground rebellion group, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, the Sons of Liberty, in 1765. And usually we associate that group with people like Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry. This one's kind of cool because it was printed right here in Freehold in 1765. So I always thought that was kind of neat. Let's see. Okay, so moving on to the next exhibit, the one we're taking a look at tonight. This is called the Storm of War. So really, everything from the period after the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord in April of 1775. So this now marks the beginning of the Revolutionary War with Great Britain, and also essentially a civil war in places like Monmouth County, where suddenly you have a lot of deeply divided allegiances. So you have people who are very, very much in favor of the war for independence. You may hear them referred to as patriots or Whigs. And then there was loyalists who did not really support the war for whatever reasons. And then as this war went on, much of the enslaved black population of Monmouth also joined this loyalist group. They, in fact, saw a much easier path to freedom by siding with the British instead of. They kind of figured even if they had taken up arms for the colonies, there wasn't much in their future that looked like they were going to be freed of slavery. So the British were, by that point, offering them some freedom in exchange for service. And then the third group you had was the disaffected, who were really kind of hesitant to take sides, sometimes flip flop back and forth throughout the war. They were more concerned with sort of preservation of their family or their farm or their livelihood, or for whatever reason, didn't have enough of an agenda to really take a firm stance. So you have these three really competing groups: the patriots, the loyalists, and the disaffected. And really, just as much as the war with the British, raged on in New Jersey and Monmouth County, so did this internal civil conflict equally rage on. So this here's a letter, an open letter, 1776, to the Provincial Congress of New Jersey. And it's petitioning for Richard Lloyd to lead one of the local Monmouth companies and one of the battalions that were forming as part of the Continental Army. So this was a very early unit. And if any of you are familiar, which I'm sure many of you are, with early Monmouth history families, you'll probably notice some familiar names. You can see Covenhoven, Lawrence, Mout, who else is there? Hendricks. So, some of Monmouth's earliest families. Kind of cool to see their signatures on documents like this. So like I mentioned before, a great deal of loyalist activity in Monmouth. And these two documents, you know what? I think I skipped one. Yeah, I'll go back one. Okay, the return of pay due to Captain Sweetman's company under Colonel Daniel Hendrickson. This is also 1776. Daniel Hendrickson was, of course, one of the more fervent patriots from Middletown. So this is a return of pay and lists the officers and privates and the amounts due to them. And then on the flip side, you have documents like these, the Loyalist Inquisitions. So these are really an interesting kind of series of documents. They're essentially court trials, these inquisitions they called them, when there was the county commissioners would present evidence of a person's disallegiance to the colonies and evidence that they were aiding or fighting for the British. And many times these people had already taken off, so they were maybe had fled to Staten Island or New York, and so they weren't even present at these trials. But nevertheless, they went on, and many times would be found guilty during these inquisitions. And unfortunately, they would have their homes seized, their property seized. So it became a very, very tumultuous time for not only for loyalists but just for these kind of battling sectors here. These two inquisitions are for Joseph Clayton, who came from Freehold, and then on the right you have Oliver Talman of Shrewsbury, and these are both dated 1778. So of course, I always think that, I always loved maps. I think that the Revolutionary period produces some of the coolest maps out there. And there's quite a lot of them. This one's entitled "An Accurate Map of the Present Seat of War Between Great Britain and Her Colonies in North America." This was published in 1776 in London. So you can see this one extends all the way west to about Louisiana, and you can really only see a small little portion of New Jersey on this one. But what's kind of neat about this one is it does note many of the regions of Native American tribes. So if you look, for example, below Lake Erie down in Pennsylvania, you can see things like the Confederate Indians. So all these maps had different kind of intricacies, and you could learn different things by looking at these maps. One of the things I always find interesting is that so many of these maps became essentially a form of propaganda. I mean, just like the pamphlets and the flyers that were going around. You could say just as much by the title of a map. I mean, 1776. So by this time, the colonists had declared their independence, of course, from the colonies. But if you look at all the British-made maps for the next few years, they're still being referred to as, of course, the colonies of Great Britain or similar wording. Whereas if you look at the American-made maps of the time, you don't see that language anymore. So just kind of interesting, and you'll even see disputes in the actual land, like which territories are owned by Great Britain, which are owned by someone else. So it just, like I said, the maps are as detailed as they are. They can become very propaganda techniques, and they can differ amongst each form. So just something kind of neat to look at. Another map, this one is actually called the Battle of Monmouth, is June 28th, 1778. This was made by John Graves Simcoe, and MCHA owns, I think, a series of 3 of Simcoe's maps. They're all very similar. He was actually a commander of the British Rangers. So this is a handmade map by Simcoe, and it documents the British troop movements and then the evacuation following the Battle of Monmouth. So Simcoe's maps, and I think he had a number of journals as well, they're really considered some of the best primary sources of the Revolutionary War. And of course, as historians, that's what we love to see, is primary sources and things like maps and documents and manuscripts. So this is another one of the things that we'll have on display here. And as I go through, of course, these are just some of I'm just trying to give a kind of an overview, some of the examples of different types of things you'll see at the exhibit, but obviously impossible to cover everything. I will say this will probably, well, no, it will be our biggest exhibition in many, many years, perhaps ever. It's going to be the entire museum. So much of our collection draws from that Revolutionary War period. It's really, really the heart of our collection. So It's definitely one that, if you're interested, especially in this period, that you're going to want to check it out. Let's see. A couple local places. So the Monmouth Courthouse in 1778, a pencil sketch, and this was actually the second courthouse of Monmouth. Sometimes you'll hear the Battle of Monmouth referred to as the Battle of Monmouth Courthouse, but this was the actual structure as depicted in the sketch. This was built around 1730. It was the second courthouse. The previous one had been destroyed by fire. And then following the Battle of Monmouth, the courthouse served as kind of a makeshift hospital for the sick and the wounded, as did some of the local churches. So this stood kind of like where the Hall of Records is today. And it's believed that the foundations of the courthouse actually remain under that the plaza in front of that Hall of Records. And the Hall of Records, of course, itself served as the courthouse later on. So a lot of you will probably recognize this painting. This is Emanuel Leutitz's Washington rallying the troops at Monmouth. And this was, of course, the artist who painted the famous Washington crossing the Delaware earlier. So this was a later one of Leutitz's works. This is definitely MCHA's most recognizable collection item, I would say. It's right now hanging in one of our galleries permanently, so it's always on view. But of course, for this exhibit, we're going to highlight it and kind of try to really pick it apart. It's one of those paintings where you can look at it, 100 times, and every time you look, you'll find something new or a detail you might have missed, or just a little something. So it's kind of what I think is really cool about this one. And we've tried to find some creative ways of kind of taking a deep dive into this, and not only the history of it, but little scenes that go on in the background, things that's not always, people may not always notice. But this is one that you may have seen published pretty routinely in books and journals. It's been on loan to places like Mount Vernon. It's been in the recent Ken Burns documentary, if you happen to see that. As a few years ago, I'm not sure if it still is, but if anyone goes down to Disney World, it's at the Hall of Presidents. It's in that video, and many other publications and different media. So a couple of different little themes of this exhibition: women of war. So of course, people like the famed Molly Pitcher, the heroine of Monmouth, often identified as Mary Hayes, or amongst a few other names. She was, of course, supposedly the woman who loaded cannons during the battle after her husband fell. And this is one of those things where you could, do an entire talk on this. And in fact, I think one of our earlier lecture series programs was, in fact, about Molly Pitcher. Historian John Fabiano did one on Molly Pitcher. So if you are interested in this, check out our YouTube channel. You can find a video about her. So a couple of depictions here of Molly Pitcher. And then on the right is kind of a cool little item. This is Martha Washington's powder jar, made around 1770. You can tell it's a very kind of fancy jar made of Venetian glass. This was actually from the Van Cortlandt Mansion in New York, a place where Martha and her husband used to frequent. And this was on the dressing table, which she used very often. So Martha Washington was known to actually travel with her husband throughout the Revolution. And so she's noted in many of the journals and things along the way. So this is kind of a cool little item to check out, Martha Washington's powder jar. And of course, we have a few things stemming from her husband as well. You may have heard of him. I'm not going to get into those today, though, but just because of time constraints. But we do have letters. We have a couple artifacts that are really cool. Another topic we're going to delve into a little bit: health and medicine. So this is one of those important topics that comes up very often when you're studying the Revolutionary War. Diseases like smallpox, these were really more deadly than any army could be during the Revolution. So, and the science behind them was still very much lacking. So there wasn't much in terms of what could be done. Although this was one of the earliest times that they began inoculating troops for things like smallpox. And a lot of historians point to that decision made by George Washington to inoculate the troops as perhaps one that saved our chances in the war, because without that inoculation, even though it was early and there were risks associated, pretty certain that many troops would have been wiped out by smallpox. And unfortunately for them, most of the British troops were already immune to this disease, so it was primarily affected the American troops. So on the left there, you see a little image of what they called bloodletting or bleeding. This was a very common practice, thought to really cure pretty much everything. It was a practice where doctors would remove what they called excess blood, and they would use fleams or little bleeding knives. You'll see in the center there. So at the throat or the wrist, they would literally just puncture the skin and let the blood flow, as you can see on the left there, capture it in a little bowl and just take lots of. They thought by taking this blood that they were kind of removing the toxins or regaining balance in the body. Unfortunately, we know today this only really hastened an illness or many times death. So it was not something that actually worked, but it was very common going back hundreds, maybe thousands of years, even prior to this. In fact, when George Washington died in the day or so before his death, he was very ill with a bacterial throat infection. So, of course, doctors of the time looked to bleeding to try to cure him. And they actually bled him of about 80 ounces of blood over the course of a day or so. So if that comes out to about 40% of your body's total blood. So, looking back, would he have survived? Nobody can say that for sure, of course, probably not. But it certainly did not. When you're that ill and then you go on to lose almost half of your body's blood, it's certainly going to hasten the illness. And then over on the right, that's tooth extraction key. So kind of a morbid looking piece there. Very early dental apparatus. This was owned by Dr. Jacobus Hubbard. He was a doctor and a surgeon for the 1st Regiment of the Monmouth Militia. Sometimes you'll see this called a tooth key. So it was really just for removing infected teeth. There was nothing fancy about it. Just kind of clamp down like a key and twist it, and the tooth would pop out. Thankfully, we've kind of moved on from practices like this, but this was another one of the kind of those morbid representations of wartime surgery and medical practice. A couple what we call relics of war. We're going to have tons of things like, muskets and cannonballs and all kinds of things that either stem from the battle itself or perhaps from soldiers who fought in the war. A lot of local Monmouth names, hopefully you'll remember, and of course some more notable names as well. So on the left here, we have what's called a horn cup, very common during the Rev War, made right from the horn of a cow or similar. This was owned by Private Daniel Denice, and he served in the 4th Regiment of the Monmouth Militia. You can obviously tell this was his because he carved his name right into it. Always kind of neat to see little carvings and depictions and names and things like that, dates sometimes. In the middle, dispatch box that was at the Battle of Monmouth. I believe this descended through the Woodhull family. I'll have to check on that one, though, but that's another example of the types of things that will be in the exhibit. And then on the right, the more notable name, Marquis de Lafayette. This was his snuff box, which was, as the story goes, given to him by none other than George Washington. Of course, I don't know that for sure, but we do, or at least pretty sure that he owned the snuff box. Kind of a fancy mother of pearl type of snuff box. And Marquis de Lafayette, of course, the French military officer who was commissioned an officer in France at age 13, believe it or not. And later came here, commanded Continental troops under George Washington. So he served at the Battle of Monmouth. He also commanded troops at the war's final battle of Yorktown. And at that point, he was, I think, 23 years old, so still very young to be taking on such a task. But that was the Marquis de Lafayette. And then later on in life, he became a key figure in the French Revolution. And you'll see his name come up a few times throughout the exhibit, whether through artifacts or things that have kind of passed through his hands at some point. Um, Trying to think, Colonel Monckton's sword. That's one of the things that he carried later and brought back. Um, so uh, sorry, just whoops. Okay, so this one is a map of the Deep Search Metal Detecting Club when they were at the Monmouth battlefield. I'm not sure exactly what year this was, but like I said, we'll have many relics and things from the battlefield. Um, and of course, Monmouth Battlefield is a state-owned park, so it's off limits to things like digging or metal detecting. But in the past, there have been organized archaeological digs or things like metal detecting clubs have been given permission to kind of go and hunt for these artifacts. And we were fortunate enough to receive at one point many of these artifacts from the club. This one's a little bit tough to see, but it's kind of a topographical map of the battlefield, and there's a legend on the side that shows where they're recovering all types of things like musket balls and coins, buckles, metals, coppers, spoon handles, let's see, buckshot, things like that. And of course, things like cannonball, all types of and sizes of cannonballs. Way before the current staff was here, back in the 1930s or whatnot. If you look in our accession records, you'll see tons of these cannonballs that were plowed up on fields by Monmouth farmers, and then they would bring them to our door and say, "Oh, we found another cannonball," and they would be donated to us. So over the years, that's in addition to donations, we really got a lot of them that way, just by being plowed up on the fields along the battlefield, and somehow they made their way through our doors, where we of course still have them today. Um, so this is the Masonic apron of Moses Sproul, who was a Continental Army soldier, 1775 to 1783. So Sproul served quite a long duration in the Continental Army. And then he went on to live right here in Monmouth County. Um, he was given, I think this apron was actually presented to him by George Washington. You can see the little Masonic symbol in the middle there. I don't know that this will be on view the entire time. We'll have to talk to Bernadette Rogoff, our director of collections, and of course, textile expertise aficionado, whatever you want to call her. But this is, as you can see, a very fragile piece, and typically textiles like this can't stay out for prolonged periods of time. But we do hope to get this out, maybe rotate it in and out with a couple other things, and then and that's another thing I think you'll see if you come to see this exhibit, because our collection in this area is so vast. We will be swapping out things like documents and letters and some of the muskets and some of the textiles, just to really kind of rotate in and out as much as we can throughout the duration of the really 2+ years that this will be up. We want to have it running at least through the 1778 Battle of Monmouth commemoration. So tons and tons of stuff to see. And so if you come once, you can come back again and maybe see some new stuff. A couple more little things that we're going to have out in the exhibit. Of course, some of the newer acquisitions we have. This was one we were just donated probably less than a year ago, I believe, at this point. This is a slant top desk from the old Tenant Parsonage, of course, which once stood on the Monmouth battlefield. A little depiction of the old Tenant Parsonage there at the bottom, Courier and Ives print from 1859. So this was a desk. We don't know exactly, what years this was in the parsonage, but it was certainly used by whoever the current rector was, and is now, we were fortunate enough to have it in our collection. One of the first things we noticed about this, which we thought was pretty cool, was when you open it up, on the desk, in the inside of the desk is a little carving, which is called a apotrope. I can never say this word. Apotropaic mark, sometimes called a witch mark, protection mark. So these are very early symbols. While they're sometimes called witch marks, they're really not associated with witchcraft as we think of it. They were more like a protection mark. So this is just one form called a hexafoil or a daisy wheel, and you'll see these carved into things like desks, a lot of times in the sides of buildings, very frequently in like nurseries or children's furniture, many times from New England. So it's a good chance that this desk probably stemmed from the New England area, and kind of made its way here. So these were usually, 17th, maybe early 18th century. I don't know exactly how, I don't want to say prominent, but you do see these once in a while. I think we have two or three pieces of early furniture with marks like this on them. So just another kind of little cool thing to see. Interesting to see that it's actually in a desk from the parsonage, which of course related to the old tenant church. But wish we knew who carved it, of course. But I think that will go down in history as something we won't know. And then, of course, we have the Monmouth flag. This is another one of the MCHA's kind of prize collection items, circa 1775, 1776. Very large flag. You can't really tell the scope of it here, but this was originally thought to actually be a British flag for many years. It was taken around the time, I think, from the battle, but at first glance, it does kind of appear to be a British flag, but it's actually now, through research, historians have found that it was one of the earliest American flags. So, in fact, very recently, we had this on loan to the Museum of the American Revolution last year, 2025. They had an exhibit up called Banners of Liberty. This was, I think, 10 or 12 of the earliest made flags in the United States. And we were fortunate enough to have have our flag on view there. Really cool to see it down there, and we just got it back, so we're very excited to have it hanging once again in our galleries, and I believe this will be up through the duration of the exhibit. So I think this, along with the Emanuel Leutze painting, are probably two of the most well-known pieces of our Revolutionary War collection. And this is one of those where this, along with the painting, and really along with a lot of these things, like they're really cool to see on the screen, but you really have to get up close and kind of see them, and really just to be able to see all the intricacies and the stitching, and it's just really incredible. I mean, it's you're just face to face with some of literally the earliest history of the United States, found right here in Monmouth County. So really pretty cool. Let's see. Okay, so that was pretty much about all I had. Like I said, this was not going to be a very long one. Just wanted to kind of give an overview of what's coming at Summer of Revolution. This will be on view for a good amount of time. I'm thinking at least 2 years, likely more. Like I said, we want to have it coincide with the next big commemoration, of course, 1778, the Battle of Monmouth. And so we're going to try to do varied programming, both here at the museum, and as many of you know, we operate a couple 18th century historic homes throughout the county. So I mentioned before the old tavern, the Allen House Tavern in Shrewsbury, and Covenhoven House right here in Freehold. And we're going to try to really bring a lot of the programming and artifacts and things into these houses, so we can tell other stories. We don't want to just give the same, not that it's not interesting, but people have done the history of the Revolutionary War before. We're making this very Monmouth centric, so we really want to dive into the families of Monmouth. Everyone from patriots to loyalists to women and children, enslaved, indentured servants. What was going on? What were people experiencing during this time? So we're going to bring that into the houses and have different ways of doing that. Dana mentioned before, very, very helpful historian Michael Adelberg, who we've gotten so much information from over the years. I know he's due to come and do a book signing and a talk, so things like that we're going to be scheduling constantly. So just keep an eye on our social media, website. I'm sure Dana will give you all that info if she hasn't already. So I think I'll stop it here. And like I said, short and sweet. Just want to welcome everyone to the upcoming exhibit. I hope you can come check it out and see all this cool stuff for yourself.
Awesome. You want to turn on your camera, Joe? Or are you going to leave it off? Put mine
Yeah, hold on.
on.
Let me see
Okay.
if I can figure that one. I haven't used Zoom in a while, but
I hate putting mine on too, but
yeah, there's a slideshow again.
that was great. Thank you. Yay, we're getting a lot of applause. I love that. So cute. Rob is asking
There we go.
if the Courier print and the Simcoe maps are original or if they're prints. I'm going to answer that.
So the Courier print is a print, mass-produced print. It is an original print, the produced by Courier Knives, and the Simcoe maps are original. The original maps drawn by Simcoe.
Mhm. Any artifacts from Huddy, Scudder, or Foreman? Oh, I want to jump on this answer, but
Yeah,
I
go
can't.
ahead. You
I
can
have to
take
let
it.
you do it. I have to let you answer.
Dana's a big fan of the Joshua Huddy story.
Mhm.
We do have the key to Huddy's house or tavern that will be on display. What we actually just very recently discovered is that if anyone has been to the Covenhoven house in Freehold, another one of our colonial era houses, if you go into the kitchen, the old kitchen, the fireplace crane, that was from Huddy's house, and we knew for many years that we had a hearth fireplace crane that was from that house. We just didn't know which one, and it didn't have a number on it, so we could never quite figure that out. But it turns out that there were two records in our records for that. One from the original donation, and another one back in the '60s, which said that it went to Covenoven to become part of the furnishing of that house. So if you want to see Captain Huddy's crane, you can go ahead to Covenoven House on the weekend and check that out.
And you found that out, right?
I think I stumbled across the record like so many times we
You
did.
did. I know you stumble across everything. I think the best way to kind of sum up this presentation is we got stuff, right? We have good stuff at the Monmouth County Historical Association.
Yeah, certainly I think so. I mean, we have a
Mhm.
collection now. We've been saying 30,000 objects since about I don't know 1980. So I feel like it's
It's
got to be a
probably-
lot more by this point. But yeah, for all the houses are furnished and like I said, the Revolutionary War period is really kind of our sweet spot when it comes to collections items. And we're going to try to put out pretty much everything we've got. I know a few places are probably not all that happy with us because we've had to turn down a few loans, but we really want to put everything on display for these exhibits. And like I said, I only got to a small little preview tonight, a portion of what we're going to offer, but a lot more to come.
Mhm. Rob, also we do have things from Scudder and Foreman. We have a
Oh, that's
great
right.
letter from David Foreman.
Yeah, a couple letters from David
What a
Foreman.
great letter.
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to
Another. Yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that was another one of our recent conservation items because it was such an important letter. I think we could
Mhm.
do from him. One discusses Colonel Ty, of course, the famed Black Brigade of Colonel Ty and other former enslaved people of Monmouth who kind of banded with the loyalists at Sandy Hook and went on these raids. And I don't know. To me, the Civil War or conflict, whatever you want to call it, is just as fascinating as
Yeah.
the overarching revolution with Great Britain. I've always found it fascinating. So
It really is. And I feel like sometimes people pass by the documents. I see that happening, and I don't know
yeah,
if
go read the
I'm just
documents.
biased, but you guys, like these documents, they're literally speaking to you. They're communicating these
Yeah,
amazing
yeah.
stories. So
Original
don't walk.
documents, handwritten. You'll see. In fact, there's another one. We have a petition that was signed by Huddy, which we just discovered that a few years back. So
Mhm.
one of the petitions will have his signature on it. So, and if you come and you don't see a specific thing on view that we have mentioned or talked about, feel free to grab one of us or whoever's here, and there's a good chance it's here, or we could at least let you know when it will be on display, or if it's accessible, we can uh, show you then. So,
Right.
um, yeah,
And the exhibit opens April 29th, right?
yeah, yeah.
Someone is asking about that. I
It's not
may
very
have
far.
accidentally said the 28th because it was in my head.
Wherever that Wednesday is.
Really hoping I didn't say the 28th. I
Yeah.
may have. So that's on me.
Yeah, so and we're currently I don't think our hours will be changing. We're Wednesday. Oh God, Wednesday through what are we? Saturday or Sunday now?
A Saturday,
Sat
Wednesday to Saturday, 1 to 4.
1 to 4.
And if anybody, if I said the 28th, I'm sorry, I'm totally wrong. Let's see. Alicia, where is the exhibition going to be? It's in Freehold. It's at 70 Court Street in Freehold, right across from the courthouse. I hope you don't know where that
Yeah, should
is.
have mentioned that. Sorry.
Actually, I just hope you need ways to get there.
If yeah, it's a little bit if you haven't been here. It's a small building, but it's a brick building. You'll see the sign for MCHA, but you'll see the very large, tall battle monument right across the street in that field. So if you find the monument, just cross the street, and
Go across the
there we
street.
are.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? No, this was great. I hope everyone comes. They're really doing a great job. It's going to be really interesting. We have some fun elements. I think it's going to be great.
Yep,
Anybody?
looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right, everyone, have a good night. Thank you for showing up tonight. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.